Click here to subscribe our channel and do not forget to press the bell icon to get regular updates of our videos. Hello friends, good afternoon to all of you. I am back with another video on Sociology Optional subject for UPSC CSE mains examination. In this video, we are going to cover the problems of rural labor, bondage and migration under the Rural and Agrarian Transformation India. So friend, please do this share as much as possible so that more and more people will get benefited. Comment and like the video and ask any doubt if you have. And now you can also follow us on FB page, that is facebook.com/Unorthodox Academy. So friend, as you know that we are covering slot 4, that is work, economic life, agriculture industry, and paper 1 we have already finished topic 6, that is work and economic life. And in this paper 2 we are covering rural and agrarian transformation India, and by finishing this video we are also going to cover the rural and agrarian transformation India. So friend, as you know that we are covering the topic D, that is problem of rural labor, bondage and migration. So the migration topic is already covered in the slot 2 of autonomous topic under population dynamics, that is component of population growth, birth, death and migrations. So in this video also I am going to covering the migrations but from a little bit different perspective. So please see the migrations of population dynamics also, because that will also be helpful for you. So now we see the problems of rural labor. So basically rural labor refers to the workers in the village whose only source of income is their labor. They sell their labor to earn money. They have no control over land or capital. Rural labor include tenants, agricultural laborers and other landless laborers and artisans. So the level of specialization being low in villages, many individuals are seen to be engaged in multiple activities for subsistence. Hence, many workers worked in varied sectors. So the problems of those landless laborers are multifaceted. At the core of all this is the problem of low wage labor and unemployment. It is estimated that on an average they are totally unemployed for a period of about 100 days and self-employed for about 50 days in a year. So now we see the various problems of rural labor which can be studied as under. The first is the security of tenure. So one of the major objectives of government land reforms movement was to ensure security of tenure of tenancy and provide minimum wages. However, the implementation has been unsatisfactory, implementation has been uneven, and landlords have made use of certain loopholes to escape the rules. Then the second problem is the wage. A major problem faced by rural labor is that supply of labor in the labor market is more than demand. As a result, wages are low. Government has instituted a minimum wages regulation law. However, it is not followed by landlords. Indeed, the National Commission on Labor had termed it as dead letter. Then the third problem is the capitalist mode of farming, and the fourth one is the bonded labor. So the problem of bonded labor has substantially decreased in a recent year but still remains. So landlords do not let their bonded laborers free and force them to declare themselves as casual laborers. Then there is also a problem of non-farm landless labor. Then there is a problems of tenant. So then there is a problem of artisans. So the socio-economic situations of artisans has deteriorated a lot during British rule due to competition from British manufactured goods. With independence, tariff barriers were imposed on manufactured goods and conditions of artisans improved. Government has also reserved certain businesses for village and small scale industries. So in spite of this, artisans face numerous problems. They face problems in procuring raw materials, they cannot offer new technology and do not have institutional support to market their products. So due to pauperization, many skilled artisans migrate to urban areas in hope of better opportunities. This trend has in fact harmed them and doomed them to underemployment, slum life and exploitation in hands of informal sector industries in cities. So now we see the bonded labor. So the bondage can be conceptualized as a social condition when a person sells himself away to his employer on condition of specific economic privileges. It is a system of institutionalized slavery where the laborer does not have independence and freedom of right to work. The service is rendered for debt or in lieu of the interest occurring to the debt. So the labor which remains in the bondage for a specific period for the debt incurred are called the bonded labor. So the debtor agrees to mortgage his service or services of any or all members of his family for a specified purpose or unspecified period. So then there are basically two basic features. The first is that of indebtedness and the second one is the forced labor. So now there are types, we see the types of bondage. So basically the National Commission on Rural Labor spelled out these four kinds of bonded labor practices present in India. The first one is the intergenerational bondage. The second one is the loyalty bondage. The third one is the bondage through land allotment, and the fourth one is through the bondage of distressed widows. So now we see the causes of bondage. So the main causes of origin, growth and perpetuation, indebtedness and bonded labor system are the economic, thou the social and religious factors to support the customs. So now we see the economic factors. The first economic factor is extreme poverty of people. The second one is inability of people to find work for livelihood. The third one is inadequate rise of land holdings to support family. The fourth one is lack of alternative small scale loan for the rural and urban poor. The fifth one is natural calamities like drought, flood and etc. The sixth one is meaning income from forest produce, that is for tribes. And then inflation and constant rising price. Then now we see the social factor. The first social factor is the expenses on occasions like marriage, death, feast, birth of a child, etc., leading to a heavy debts, which is said by the R.S. Sharma. Then caste-based discrimination. Then there is lack of concrete social welfare scheme to safeguard against hunger and illness. Then non-compulsory and unequal educational system. Then there is migration. So now we see the religious factors. So the reference from the religious texts are given, and religious arguments are used to convince the people of low caste that religious enjoins upon them to serve people of high caste. Illiteracy, ignorance, immaturity and lack of stability and professional training sustain such attitude. So broadly speaking, it may be concluded that bondage originates mainly from economic and social pressures. So the Utsa Patnaik says the persistence of feudalism in Indian agriculture is greatly responsible for the continuity of bondage in the countrysides. In rural sector, feudalism is persistent because traditional land laws do come from upper caste, and hence relationship between caste and agriculture is absolutely profound. Low caste either works as a tenants or sharecroppers going for traditional methods of contract, and low caste of untouchables who are landless in order to avoid distance migrations opt for bonded labor. Then Ashok Rudra, Pranav Vardhan and Arvind S. O's says that bonded labor persists under the disguise of attached labor in capitalist agriculturist market. More intensive is the capitalist development. Highest is exploitation that result in consolidation of bonded labor. Then Shashi Kumar said when man migrates from village, the women and children are reduced into bonded labor by the local landlords. Then Lahiri in West Bengal, Baramase contract system is a form of disguised bonded labor. In this system, the labor is given some advance, free food, shelter to work for the master throughout the year. So due to poverty, borrowing continues, so is the attachments with the family. Then Hanumant Rao said that bonded labor is a product of regular natural disaster, uneven distributions of land in the countryside, fragile ecology, intensive caste-based exploitation, perpetual poverty, lack of alternate source of livelihood. Then due to Green Revolution, the states like Punjab and Haryana received high rate of migrant labor from poor states who got trapped in the bondage. So now we see that today's scenario, or basically the magnitude of bondage in India. Bonded labor system has been enlisting in Indian society among agricultural laborers in the name of beggars and riots. Today it has extended to workers working in brick kilns, bidi factories, stone quarries, glass factories and detergent factories, carpet, gemstones and many other factories. So the cultural environment of exploitation under which the practices of bonded labor flourish witnessed all forms of exploitation and operations ranging from child labor to the sexual exploitation of the bonded woman. Then Nadeem Hasnain in his study of Kolta bonded labor found that the untouchables were barred by customs from owning land. It was further compounded by the social ban on keeping or touching gold, thus making him totally vulnerable to any economic exigencies when a Kolta would be having nothing except his body, which becomes a ready object for mortgage. Then Foundation and National Labour Institute in a combined study of bonded labor in 1978 found that around 2.6 lakh of workers in India are either bonded workers or are attached workers. So it is based on a survey of 1,000 villages spreading in 10 states. Then National Commission on Rural Labor in a study found that Bonded labor is largely used in agriculture sector, plantation sector. Child labor is bonded from are greatly used in hazardous sectors. Then, among many socio-economic disabilities, the untouchables have been suffering from their customary landlessness. The scheduled castes of today are the worst victims of debt bondage. Then, Deccan Development Society found out its study that 533 children and 786 adults are pushed into the state of bonded labor. National Human Rights Commission, in a case brought before it, found out in Jharkhand how a person was forced to work for 20 years because of non-payment of rupees 2000. Now we see the steps taken by government and the suggestions with regard to the bonded labor. So the constitution prohibits beggar under Act 23. Then the Bonded Labor System Abolition Act of 1976, the government tried to tackle debt bondage head on. Then NHRC had development core groups of identification and rehabilitations of bonded labor. Then centrally sponsored scheme is launched for the abolition of bonded labor for the provision of offering rupees 20,000 to every bonded labor rehabilitated. Then different NGOs like Sahyog, Mahila, Samakhya, Sankalp, Bachpan Bachao Andolan are working in the area of abolitions of the bonded labor. Then the problem of bonded labor should be understood from the perspective of a larger social situations. Then the various policies to eradicate it need to emphasize on poverty alleviation measures. Then elimination of feudalistic ideology which is prevalent in India. Then intensive caste-based inequality need to be checked. So now we see the migrations, or basically the labor migration. Labor migration is an important factor affecting the course of socio-economic development in India. Accelerated movement of people originating mainly from the rural and backward areas in search of employment has been one of the most important features of the labor market scenario in India during the post-independence period. So now we see the nature of labor migration. So as a majority of occupation in which migrant laborers are engaged do not prefer women workers. Most of the migrants are males who migrate individually. Then this is however not the case in certain occupations in which family migration is cheaper for the employer. Sugarcane is a case in a point break kiln, and in constructions are the other example which attract family labor. Then majority of the migrants belong to the backward and scheduled castes as well as scheduled tribes, being either landless or too poor. Then labor migration is a complex phenomenon and encompasses different streams which vary in duration, nature of origin and destination areas, and characteristics of migration process. Then the nature of contemporary labor migrations can be examined at a various levels depending on the degree and extent of vulnerability to which the migrant worker is exposed. These levels are the migrations for survival and subsistence. So now we see the major problems encountered by migrant laborers. The first one is the premature termination of job contracts, then hanging the clause of contract to the disadvantage of the workers, delay in making payments, violations of minimum wage standards, forced overtime works without returns. In case of most interest-rate unskilled and semi-skilled migrants laborers run high risk of exploitations, for they are exposed to large uncertainties and lack access to information and knowledge, thus making it very difficult for them to switch jobs in case of dissatisfactions with the current employers. So because of their optionless situations, these laborers lack bargaining power and thereby fail to negotiate reasonably pay scales and fair working conditions with the contractors. Most migrants live in open spaces, makeshift shelters, or illegal settlement which lack the basic infrastructure and access to civic amenities. They have no local ration cards which can provide them their food at subsidized rate through the public distribution system. Then they are highly prone to occupational health hazard and vulnerable to epidemics including HIV and AIDS. Then, since the migrants are mobile, their children have no facilities or access to schooling. They do not come under the purview of either the local government or the NGOs programs, for they do not belong to that particular region. So, citing the problem of monitoring, most agencies leave them outside the scope of development interventions. So in India, migrant laborers are largely found in the developed stage. The traditional migrants coming from underdeveloped regions of the country are the most marginalized sections of the society, namely the tribals and the scheduled caste. These migrants are entirely without legal protections or social security. They are invisible and are not acknowledged. They are denied access even to basic amenities in most of the cases. They have no identity in the places where they live and no voice in the places they have left behind. So the migrations offers a very fertile ground for traffickers. In India, migrants who leave their homes in search for better employment opportunities and marital prospects fall easy prey to traffickers for want of adequate informations. Alongside cross-border trafficking, internal trafficking of women, children and men for purpose of sexual exploitation, domestic servitude, bonded labor and indentured services too is widespread. So thank you guys for listening and watching this video. Thank you.